Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the new Sencut Phantara. At least that's how I'm going to pronounce it. I'll show you guys the name of it right here. Phantara could be. It is available. It is not expensive, as is generally the case with Sencut knives. If you're not familiar with Sencut knives, they definitely make some of the better stuff in this price range. I will link this knife and Sencut knives in general down in the description so you guys can check it out. It is a larger knife. So if you've ever looked at Sencut and thought, cool, but I wish they made something bigger, this is definitely on the bigger side. I've got a lot to say about it, and I'm going to share my thoughts with you. Thanks so much to my patrons for supporting me. Thanks to Sencut for sending us in, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Let's go ahead and get a measurement. I think this is quite a bit larger than I thought it was going to be from pictures. It's actually nearly 9. It's 8.75 inches. Blade length, I'm going to go to the center of the scale here and say it's 3.75. Your cutting edge is also about 3.75. Let's do some size comparisons. I think a couple of things here are going to be a little different. I want to put it up against something larger like the Demco 8010. When you see customized scales for my size comparison knives, those are either original goat or Flytanium. That stuff's all linked in the description as well. So you can see here, it is actually fairly similar to the overall length of the 8010. It's just not quite as thick. How about up against the Ritter? I'm sorry, the Ritter Hogue. I got myself all thrown off trying to introduce something else here. The Ontario Rat 1 and the Rat 2. There we go. Let's do the Spyderco, I think, PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. There we go. And then let's put it up against the Benchmade Grip Tilliner, in this case the Ritter Hogue, which of course has the new original goat titanium scales there. Very cool. And then let's do another one. Instead of the bug out, let's do the Hogue Deca, which is also sporting some original goat scales. So yeah, I think you can tell here it is definitely a large knife. How's the action? It's actually really good. There's enough blade there. I mean, the weight of it, it's not that, I mean, Sencut does a good job with their internals, their pivot action, stuff like that. This is running on bearings. The detent is properly tuned for the flipper tab, and this hole here on the blade is positioned exactly right to do your reverse flicks. You can also thumb flick it out, or, if you're not feeling fancy, you can just wheel it out. It's honestly really, really easy to do. The only area that's a little bit bothersome is just, it's nothing sharp here. It's just a thin lock bar, and it's got some teeth on it. So when you go to disengage it, this should have been cut just a little bit lower so we could come in from the side. As it sits, you kind of have to push into it and then over, which means you're pushing those teeth into your finger every time you want to disengage it. But it's not that bad. I've definitely experienced much worse, and I think it's pretty nitpicky. I think if you pick this up, you'll adapt to it. The action's very good. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. So thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. You can see here, it's going to be a little tiny bit, thinner. If I put it up against the Demco, which, these scales actually make the Demco quite a bit. I mean, not quite a bit, but definitely thinner. You can see there, it's nowhere near as thick. So it's definitely on the thinner side. Length and height up against the PM2 and the Para 3. Let's put this guy right here, and then the PM2, we'll put it up top. It's tall, and it's fairly long, right? I mean, it's at least the same length closed as the PM2, and it's absolutely taller. I mean, it's going to be a fairly wide knife in the pocket. It's just, the relief is going to come from how thin it is. So, it's something to be aware of. Materials. We are looking at, I think the box said it, 9CR18 MOV, and I'm not going to look for it on the blade because Civivi and Sencut have gone to printing it on a microscopic level. It's just not even worth it anymore. But 9CR18 MOV for the steel, peel ply texture G10, which is fairly aggressive, and then we have steel liners, which have absolutely been milled out for weight reduction. So the weight on this guy, I'm going to say this might still come in the high 4s, low 5s. Low 5s, 5.26 ounces. So you get quite a bit of blade, but it's also quite a bit of knife. That's still not in the territory of, oh my gosh, my pants are going to fall down, right? So if you like larger knives, you might be used to a knife of this size. Certainly if you've been carrying around knives like the 8010, this won't be a problem for you. It'll actually be much smaller. but if you've been carrying around something like the Para 3, this is going to feel pretty big. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. I'm going to guess, like other Sencut knives, these are all going to be T8. And they are. Yeah, these are all T8, except for the pocket clip screws. Those are going to be T6. So very easy to take apart. As long as you have the right tools for the job, place to put the hardware, you should be good to go. Let's measure blade stock thickness. I think this is a pretty thin blade here. Sorry, it's about time to replace the batteries again. How long has it been? You guys remember when this thing was almost dying the first time? And I was like, I'm gonna make this go as long as I possibly can. It lasted for years. Now it's almost time to replace it again. Oh boy, time flies, right? 117 thousandths is what I'm coming up with here. That's pretty par for the course. For Sencut, they like a thinner blade stock. I think that's fine. It's just going to be accentuated by the fact that it has so much room to taper down to. The angle that it tapers down to the cutting edge is very good. I think that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and move into the meat and potatoes. I think it's cool that a lot of companies are like, okay, for example, like Sencut and Civivi, they have a lot of folding steak knife designs, very traditional lines. There's a lot of other companies that kind of do the same thing, and we have always like had like the, within certain parameters for height of blade and the blade style, right? It's like it's a variation of the Rat 2, right? Or the Bug Out. We just have these traditional knife handles and these traditional blade shapes. And, this one's got green G10. This one, we went through a time period where it was like every other release was like fitting within certain parameters. And they still do that. And that's fine because there's lots of people who still like knives like that. I do. They obviously, a lot of them are super duper functional, right? There's a reason that those lines, we keep seeing them pop up. I like it when we see things that go outside of those lines periodically, just to be a little bit different. And while this isn't a wildly different design, it's a much taller blade. It's a much taller, handle. So like the blade shape itself is not anything different, and neither is the handle profile. It's just everything has been enlarged and it's taller and it's longer, right? So it's a bigger knife. And it's nice to be able to get something like this for not a lot of money, because this is a $43 knife, which is fantastic. It's very straightforward. It's got a very simple construction. There's nothing going on here that's overly crazy, right? It's got a liner lock. It works. It flips. It's what you'd expect. It's just nice to get something a little bit bigger without having to carry something around that is so absolutely titanic, right? So a lot of people, the 8010 isn't necessarily a titanic knife, but compared to this knife, it absolutely is. It also costs a lot less, right? The ergonomics are very good. I'm definitely aware of the texturing on the G10, but they've knocked the edges down. So really it's just, you just get the grippiness and none of the sharpness on a frame that's this thin. Had they just gone to the edge and gone 90 degrees like a lot of companies do, which is a huge mistake, it ends up being really, really sharp. That's not the case here because you can see the edges are very much knocked down. The only part of it that I can feel is, surprise, surprise, the pocket clip that they won't change. This clip is ridiculous. They need to knock this build down. It would take a lot of their designs from 99% to 100%. I don't know that I've ever handled a perfect Sencut or perfect Civivi knife because I just don't like that build. But it's fine. The clip is still functional. It's just a little bit bothersome when you're gripping it. Outside of that, though, the ergonomic lines are great. This absolutely fills the hand despite being thin. It feels good. It feels, purposefully done. The edges, the inside of this hole here on the blade are knocked down. The blade is, like I said, very tall, and it does, like, the way that it tapers down to the edge is pretty aggressive, so it does get nice and thin down here. This will definitely be a slicer. This is the type of knife that you want to use to break down cardboard boxes and stuff like that, because it will just absolutely shred and shred and shred. Geometry, as we all know now, confirmed. I wasn't sure for the longest time, but geometry plays the biggest role in the blade performance, followed by, of course, the composition and the heat treatment. But the geometry of the blade itself will play the biggest role in performance. And this type of blade, Sencut does a fine job with 9CR 810 MOV. It's not anything spectacular, but it's a balanced steel and certainly appropriate. at the $43 territory. But this blade will cut, and it will cut continuously without an issue. So if that's what you're looking for on top of a larger blade, this is it. You don't need any more information. This is going to work for you. I also think it looks good, right? It's one of those knives where without having something else in the picture, I mean, you could say this is the truth with anything, but in this one in particular, I really thought this was going to be a short little fat knife. I thought, I was like, that thing's going to be like 7 inches, right? No, it's huge. Without having a hand or something else in the shot, you have no idea, right? So it really is big, but without being overly cumbersome, without being problematic. And it also looks nice. I like how it looks. There's a swedge that runs down almost the full length of the blade out to the tip. There's a flat that runs about 50%, maybe 55%. And then all of this is just flat, tapering down to the cutting edge, which is done very, very well. There's a nice sharpening choil down here. This will not be a difficult knife to touch up or maintain. It's got a nice tumbled finish on it, so when you go out to use it and you mark it up, who cares, because the blade's already got a nice even tumbled finish on it. The edges of the spine are knocked down, so no unnecessary sharpness up there. But enough, I guess, if you wanted to strike flint off of it, you could, right? Just a good Sencut profile. It's just different because it's a little bit larger. They did mill out, different for Sencut, right? That's what I'm saying. Is that this is wildly different for Sencut because they mostly make the same type of stuff over and over and over again. But in the grand scheme of the knife world, it's really not all that weird. But the pocket clip can be mounted for left-handed carry, which is great. We've got 2 holes here. That's how they should do it. We've got a couple of standoffs back here. And then we have, oddly enough, it's almost like 2 separate lanyard bars. I mean, there's one thing here that's definitely not the same style standoff, but it's acting as a standoff. Then we have the lanyard bar, which is also a standoff. So we have 3 different things. That's really strange. They got a peg, they got a lanyard standoff, and then they have 2 regular standoffs. So, alrighty, okay. Yeah, that's really a little bit weird, but it's not hurting anything. We got a little tiny bit of shouldering there around the stop pin, located in its usual spot. No blade play up, down, left, or right. No lock stick. No pivot lash. Very smooth and very consistent. And here with a nice clicky detent and perfect centering with no detent lash. Yeah, I like this. It reminds me a lot of the Shaman in profile, but it's a much taller blade than the Shaman. And if mine, the 3 that I own weren't completely buried right now, I would pull one out and show you. But yeah, it kind of reminds me of that. For a lot of people, this is just going to be an easy option because it is a larger, taller blade, so you get the enjoyment. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I just like enjoy, a bigger looking object, right? Just for the novelty of it. But you can carry something like that without it being cumbersome, and most importantly, without it being ridiculously expensive. This is pretty cool. I think this is one of the better deals right now for Sencut, and it's not all novelty, far from it. It's a very, very functional blade, and this is the type of thing that I mean, it'll make short work of thick cardboard, rope, rubber, right? The styrofoam, whatever. It's a great knife for that. It still is going to take up a lot of room in the pocket. It's a wide, tall object. So that's some people aren't gonna, like that as much. But if that doesn't bother you, this is a great option. This is a very recommendable knife for people who like larger knives without, wanting to deal with all the excess weight. So it's gonna go on my cheap knives I like playlist, and it's also gonna go on my recommended knives playlist. I think this is a really excellent buy, and it's nice to see something different from Sencut. That's going to be it today. Like I said, this knife and Sencut knives in general will be linked down in the description. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.